You know, against all odds, Nintendo has been having an amazing year. We all expected that Tears of the Kingdom would be excellent, but at the same time, basically everyone has been clamoring for new and more powerful hardware from Nintendo, so it's a little surprising to see the Switch have such a landmark year, even beyond Tears of the Kingdom. And what's more is, they're not done. We still have Super Mario Bros. Wonder, in addition to Super Mario RPG, WarioWare Move It, and Detective Pikachu Returns. Now, one of those may end up being a stinker. Nintendo is obviously not immune to that, just look at Everybody Want to Switch. But the point is, they've been on a roll, and it's got me to thinking about why. How is it that Nintendo has been able to keep up this pace of really good games, whereas so many other publishers are putting all their chips in on a game or two, leaving other titles to flounder, if they exist at all? I think I know why, and I find it interesting, but let me explain what I mean by the pace that Nintendo has been able to keep up. By the end of the year, Nintendo will have released an average of one game per month, which is a cadence no other publisher is able to really match. And many of those games from Nintendo have been received well by critics and gamers alike, despite the underpowered nature of the hardware. Metroid Prime Remastered and Tears of the Kingdom are two of the top games this year and have received 94 and 96 Metacritic scores, respectively. Pikmin 4 just released and it has an incredible 88 Metacritic so far. Fire Emblem Engage, Bayonetta Origins, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, and Advance Wars 1 and 2 each have Metacritics out of 80 or above. And like I said, Super Mario Bros. Wonder is coming out later this year and it looks like it's gonna be, well, wonderful. So does Super Mario RPG, and I'm cautiously optimistic about WarioWare Move It. I have no idea what to expect from Detective Pikachu, but that's coming out as well. That means that so far, the only Nintendo published game with a Metacritic lower than 80 is Everybody Want to Switch, sitting at 55. Everybody Want to Switch is a curious case as well because, sure, people made fun of how bad it was, but it was all lighthearted ribbing compared to the reception that Redfall received, and that game had practically the same Metacritic score. The reason, of course, is obvious. Microsoft has had a lot fewer games as of late, and as a result, they had a lot more writing on Redfall. In effect, Nintendo bought a ton of goodwill by just releasing good games. Here's the other thing, 2023 has been a hell of a year, like it is legitimately in the running for one of the best years in gaming ever, closing in on the likes of 1998, 2001, and 2004. There have been a ton of great games, and so we've seen a number of good showings from publishers this year. Specifically, I think Square Enix and Capcom have been incredible. Square Enix has Octopath Traveler 2, Final Fantasy XVI, Forspoken, and the upcoming Star Ocean: The Second Story R. In fact, if Nintendo isn't the best publisher of the year, there's no doubt in my mind that it would go to Square Enix. Then there's Capcom with Resident Evil 4 and Street Fighter 6, but also Mega Man Battle Network Collection, Ghost Trick, and now Exoprimal. That's definitely a solid lineup, but in my humble opinion, it trails behind Square Enix and Nintendo. One of the things that separates Nintendo from everyone else is how well they're able to keep a secret. They keep game releases close to the vest, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Super Mario RPG are huge upcoming releases that we only learned about just a month ago. These surprise announcements are so common that many people are convinced we're still getting Metroid Prime 2 remastered this year even though Nintendo hasn't announced it. Not to mention, they have a new console that they're releasing in 2024. At least that's what everyone seems to believe. It's been 6 years since the last 3D Mario, 5 years since the last Smash game, technically almost 10 years since the last new Mario Kart. We know Metroid Prime 4 is coming, so if Nintendo has played their cards correctly, it's possible that they'll be able to have a steady supply of blockbuster games in the first 1, 2, or 3 years of their new console. So again, I have to ask, how are they able to make so many quality games when there are other publishers right now who are betting big and losing their reputation with gamers quickly? The simple answer, which I think is true but doesn't tell the whole story, is that Nintendo just cares more, right? When you compare the launch of Tears of the Kingdom to the launch of, say, Cyberpunk 2077, it probably makes you think of the famous Miyamoto quote, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." It's now well known, or at least universally accepted, that Tears of the Kingdom was virtually complete 1 year before release and that Nintendo spent that additional year just polishing the game. They had an entire year to make sure Tears of the Kingdom was as bug-free as possible so that players would have the best experience they possibly could. Contrast that to CD Projekt Red, who released Cyberpunk 2077 in a state that they must have known was unacceptable, at least on console. Presumably, they were expecting the sales of the highly anticipated but partially broken game would give them an injection of funds that would allow them to continue working on and fixing the game after release. And CDPR is much smaller than Nintendo, so you can assume they didn't have the financial runway that Nintendo has. But like I said, that doesn't tell the whole story, because Cyberpunk 2077 was in development for 9 years, and Tears of the Kingdom was only in development for 6. And taking a peek at the credit for both games, my educated guess is that Cyberpunk had a slightly higher burn rate than Tears of the Kingdom, meaning they were spending more per year or per month in development than Nintendo was. This all finally brings me to why Nintendo is able to deliver quality games on a consistent basis. Smaller budgets. There's this popular meme in a circle of gamers that love indie games, and it goes, "I want shorter games with worse graphics made by people who are paid more to work less, and I'm not kidding." And you know, to some degree, that meme is a bit facetious, a bit tongue-in-cheek. I watched a really good YouTube video that flipped this statement around to something that is a lot less sensational, you could say. He said, "Games right now are too long, too focused on graphics, and made by people who aren't paid enough for how hard they work, and I'm not kidding." That version is a lot more palatable, but the truth is there are plenty of gamers that still wouldn't agree with that statement, or at least they don't care how much developers are paid or how hard they work, they just want great games. Then there's this other group of gamers that mourn the death of AA games. Stuff like Darksiders, Dante's Inferno, Prototype, or more recently, Evil West. People are intrinsically aware that we lost something big when we lost AA games. AA games were an opportunity for studios to experiment. Not every game needed to be the same, and AA games were a chance to try different mechanics that weren't universally accepted or intellectual property that wasn't already cemented. Ironically, it's rising indie budgets that have begun a renaissance of AA games with titles like Sifu, Kena Bridge of Spirits, It Takes Two, and Weird West. But what happens when a company with a lot of money is able to spend less on each of their games? Well, Nintendo is what happens. Nintendo has a graphical ceiling on their video games. Thanks to the aging Switch hardware, these games can only get so good looking. As a result, they've managed to delay ballooning budgets in a way that other big publishers haven't been able to do, precisely because Nintendo is dealing with older hardware. That offers a new perspective on Tears versus Cyberpunk. Nintendo has more than 10 times the market cap of CDPR, but if my napkin math is correct, their budget for Tears of the Kingdom was about half that of Cyberpunk. This is the financial runway I was referring to. Nintendo has runway to experiment with new game formats for familiar IP, or to establish new IP altogether, or to spend a year polishing their most anticipated title, or to simply make mistakes. It's no wonder then that they've been in no rush to replace that hardware, especially considering the fact that the Switch is still selling surprisingly well today. To the chagrin of some gamers, but perhaps good for Nintendo, by the time the Switch 2 rolls around, it should be equally as underpowered for its time as its predecessor was, leaving Nintendo in a position to do it all again. Metacritic does publisher rankings every year. Last year, Sony took the #1 spot, but I suspect that this year will be a close race between Nintendo and Square Enix. Nintendo won't always be #1 or even top 3, so I don't want to paint this picture that Nintendo has the right strategy and everyone else has the wrong strategy. It's just that Nintendo's chosen strategy is different from virtually everyone else's, and that makes it interesting. The pendulum swung away from AA games, but I think that the pendulum is on its way back. People are tired of samey games, and there's an appetite for stuff like Stray and Sifu. Nintendo has shown that it's entirely viable to make games like this, and I hope other big publishers are listening.